Welcome to Open Source Health. I'm Tripp Johnson, founder and social entrepreneur who spent the last decade trying to make healthcare a little more humane and accessible and a lot less soul-crushing. This show is about the real work of changing a broken system, from policy and strategy to using technology and AI in ways that actually help people. Whether it's intake forms, care teams, or back-end systems, we're digging into how healthcare can be built for real-world impact. Glad you're here. Hair's falling out, zit on my face, testosterone levels must be high today. No wonder I'm feeling great.
Yeah, exactly. And you haven't even lifted in 3 weeks.
No, I don't know what's going on with that. It's only been 2 weeks, let me be clear. But I am I'm not even motivated to right now, and I'm kind of okay with that. But I'm feeling a little guilty, and I'm worried that you're going to catch my gains.
Dude, I'm already caught you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
don't fret not.
All right. All
I've
right.
already gone past you on.
Well,
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah,
When are you gonna be in Raleigh again?
yeah. Whenever I need to be, apparently, right now.
Look, I got a guest pass, and we'll have a throwdown here at the old Chapel Hill Carborough YMCA.
Yeah, let's do it, man. Oh God. How you doing? How's the overall, man? How you doing?
I'm actually I'll say I'm last week was a rough week for me. Well, especially I had a couple of bad days, but now I've come to really get okay with that, because usually it means a lot of good stuff is about to come, and it's like a cycle I'm used to.
When you say that, I know you don't mean that in a woo-woo sort of way. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, I wish I had the book I was reading earlier. I have learned that really any sort of emotional high, physical high, any high is accompanied with some sort of crash, right? And I think the inverse is also true. So a lot of times when something is pretty bad, especially just personally, internally, whatever, that I think it's usually a sign that something it'd be nice to shift something. But I have found that there's a post I'm working on. There's finding clarity in the depths of despair, where I found these really low points that used to bum me out and that legitimately get me borderline suicidal ideation. uh I started journaling a lot about those 7 or 8 years ago, and what I found was almost always within a few days something there was some kind of mental breakthrough that I was struggling, I've been beating my head against the wall kind of feeling, and then by letting go I created space for something new to emerge or something.
Yeah. That's interesting. I go through cycles like that too. I think in years past I've always embraced maybe more of a stupid kind of meathead response to it, like just try to grind through. But there's such diminishing returns to that for me. Sometimes it's just better for me to just take a day off and not try to get anything done. You end up forcing something that's not there, and then just can't. I can't do anything, right? It's just not anything that I accomplish is just not good quality or worth it. I'm just going to redo it anyway.
Yeah, and I've just learned to step away. If it's not working, just let it go for a little bit. And yeah. But how you doing? You had a big ramen cooking night last night, or all weekend, right? Getting that broth ready.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, man. I think both you and I share this in common. We have these complete fixations that we just get lost into something. And I know for a while yours was chili crisp oil and homemaking it and everything. Mine was this weekend, man. I was talking with the jujitsu teammate, got it in my head that I really wanted to make some homemade ramen, and got a great Asian food superfood store here, and went bought pig neck bones and boiled them and made a tonkatsu broth, and turned out killer. So good.
I'm going home in about an hour, and I have an hour to make ramen tonight, which as I know, as you know, Mr. Miyagi over here knows that it takes like 48 hours to make a broth, but this truncated vegan version is the best that my family's going to get tonight.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're not going to throw it. You don't need to boil bones down, so you're probably good. Yeah, man. But yeah, had a big ramen weekend. Had some good time on the mats, and got a couple of really good lifting sessions in, and you know, woke up pretty foggy this morning though, so probably. But
So I'm just here to shake out the cobwebs
there you go, man.
so you can create some shareholder value.
Exactly. Yeah.
The tariffs aren't helping us yet.
No, not yet. God, man, that's fucking crazy, huh?
It's a weird time.
It's a weird time, man. We've been talking about this for these men's issues sort of thing the last couple of episodes, and I find it like I find all of this stuff that's happening right now very interesting through that lens, right? Like we talked about this idea of like coach, you like the difference between coaching and therapy and value and all that sort of stuff. It just right now strikes me as like we've got so many fucking grifters, man. Like it's wild to watch what's happening in politics and the online space right now. So that's like an initial volley I have with some of this stuff, but it drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a good sign of what's to come. Yeah. And I don't know if we can reverse the living in our own algorithmic bubbles. I mean, that's the algorithm knows how to tickle our fancies, and the more we do that, the weirder it gets and the more individual it is. And I was thinking the other day that it's probably a couple years away when like I don't. Did you ever get much into visualization, whether it was for jujitsu or anything else? Was that ever like a thing?
Not for me.
I never got like super into it, but when I was playing tennis, and I did have some like performance psychologist in college, and I don't know the evidence, but like a lot of people believe in visualization, and I think there's some evidence as to like performance, like if you can't train, you can't do things, that you can actually get a lot of the benefits from like really visualizing what it's like. But I think within a couple years, like we're literally going to have movies where we just insert ourselves as the protagonist. I mean, I think this stuff is happening so fast that now all of a sudden we're like the character in the movie, and we can feel it even more, which just moves us closer to being like brains in a vat, if you ask me.
Yeah. We're living in like a postmodernist dystopian wet dream of construct upon construct upon construct right now. Yeah.
Well, what do we want to dig into? A little more men. What were we thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I want to hear some of your thoughts on like I want to like chat a little more about like coaching and stuff and thoughts on that, because like I think we're both people that have like done a foray into therapy and tried therapy, and neither one of us have ever found it particularly helpful. But like, there's some element of it that's really interesting to me, and I, for me, one of the things that I notice is like I tend to gravitate towards coaching in anything, like whatever. I think resting state curiosity. I'm interested in a great many things, and so the whole adage, when the student's ready, the teacher appears. So I'm pretty interested in your thoughts on coaching versus therapy, and how you've applied some of that.
Well, I think the first thing I would say is like I'm huge on just mentorship and learning from others in general. Like if you don't have to recreate the wheel, if you can learn from others' lessons, go ahead and do it. It's just, quite frankly, it's inefficient not to. Um, and I've recently gotten interested again in coaching because I did a weekend embodied life workshop that was not anything I would have normally done, but one of the guys I did it with it has been a serial entrepreneur, and he's on a 4-year sabbatical right now where he's gone through a coaching certification.
Interesting. Okay.
And one of the things like it's not always fair. So let me first say, like just like whether it's any sort of mental health counseling or substance use treatment, I don't think that you have to have overcome the same challenges to help others overcome them. And I think that's a really important, and that's true in coaching, whatever. But like for me personally, I'm very interested. I've found that I have a great network and access to what I consider just brilliant, brilliant people. But oftentimes, where they're coming from doesn't apply much to my situation. So, for example, I might have phenomenal CEO, executive type mentorship of giant, giant companies, $13 billion revenue companies, but they're just not familiar with the challenges that I face as like an entrepreneurial CEO. So
Yeah.
some of their mental models are very helpful, but their experience is not with the same type of thing that I'm going through right now. So that's what made me first really interested in this guy, is marrying both the entrepreneurial side, and he has a deep interest in psychology, the Enlightenment Waking Up Project, and this broader human development kind of thesis that there are a lot of people who have models for human development, but this guy's coaching is very much in kind of the spirit of Ken Wilber's integral theory, and the idea that there's like a waking up element to human development and a growing up element to it. And so bringing those together, I think, is really, really fascinating to me. So that's kind of where I am, and I'm interested in getting a coach and getting started.
Yeah. What do you think that'll ultimately end up looking like for you, though?
I don't know. He's going to send me a proposal. I think we're going to meet weekly. I think it's going to be a little bit of a hybrid. He's doing a lot of startup advising. He's built a couple of tech companies. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a blend of like advising and a blend of actual coaching. My guess is, as we were kind of chatting before, I'm reading a book on self-awareness, and it's really made me turn the attention. I think I have incredible insight internally, but I think I'm like really, really lacking insight as it pertains to my relationships with others. And I think in a lot of places I'm in a position of power, as a CEO, but also just I've lived a pretty privileged life, and so I think there were a lot of times where I'm coming, my intentions are not matching what's received, and I really want to close the gap between how I'm perceived and what I'm intending to get across.
Interesting. I
Yeah,
like
you
that.
didn't know you were actually going to have to do therapy today, did you?
Yeah. I'm barely licensed. It doesn't count.
Wait, but hold on. Let me actually ask, like, try and put your therapist hat on, because,
Yeah, for sure.
like when we talk, especially around like substance use and recovery, I think the big book said, talks about terminal uniqueness. And I am someone who suffers greatly from a feeling of terminal uniqueness at times. Um, and so I think it makes me, and I was actually, I'll save that caveat, but I was talking to Nick about this because he was encouraging me to, potentially join the group therapy, like the same people who do it. And they were coming from a psychoanalytic kind of perspective, which again, we'll pin that for later. But like if I showed up, like if I got put on your caseload, knowing what you know about me, would that be like a fun thing? Like how would you find me the right therapist?
Man. So I guess that's two separate, two couple of thoughts. I mean, you were always the kind of guys that I liked working with, right?
Mm-hmm.
I always enjoyed someone that's willing to engage and have like verbal sparring, ring out ideas, have like, on a very selfish level, that's the sort of stuff I thrive off of, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm an external processor. I make sense of things by talking out loud, putting a half-assed idea out, and then getting excited about it and having it sort of chewed up and spit back at me, and then going back and forth, right? Um, I think the problem with guys like you in therapy is like, well, what the hell are you here for, right? Because it's not like we're not going to generate insight, right? Like you're someone that's deeply contemplative, like so. What's the purpose of this? And so then it becomes much more of a you know utilitarian sort of perspective, which you know in some ways the carrot right becomes the banter, the back and forth, but then it becomes like a what like what are your practical goals? And I think you already know that, right? Like it's I want to close that gap between my intentions and how it is that I've experienced. And so then it just becomes like a very didactic sort of experience in therapy, right? Like it becomes a hey, you when you and I were sparring verbally, now you said X, I felt this. This is exactly what we're talking about. This is where you're
Mm-hmm.
this is the relationship dynamic put into practice, right? And we're just mirroring it right now.
So I don't know much about like psychoanalysis other than I feel like it's a bunch of frou-frou about
Yeah.
unconscious mind, and it doesn't necessarily stem from what I'll say is like like truth or like first principles.
Right.
But one thing I find interesting is I have not met many people who are really into psychoanalysis who aren't exceptionally smart.
Agreed.
And that to me is a weird thing because it's as our atheist on the podcast, it's like I can have a intellectual relationship with someone who believes in God and just kind of like write that piece off. And
Yeah.
so I kind of wonder about the psychoanalysis, if it's sure the mechanism is not the one that you're attributing it to, but we can do some really useful work because what you actually just explained in like my treatment goals in terms of reflecting back things kind of close to real time
Yeah.
was very much what Nick said, like his process in group, and like their therapists are always like, what are you experiencing now? What's going on right now? Versus like any sort of what happened in the past. Why do you think you're this way? What thought are you having? What are you feeling? What's your body doing? Like just hammering that home. And I don't know if that's psychoanalysis, that just happens to be a tool in general kind of toolkits.
The your point about psychoanalysis is like is interesting, right? Because you're right. Like it's I've never met. I think so much of it is bunk, right? Like so much of it is like um, I think is just it's patently insane, right? Like I forgot what it's called. There's a psychoanalytic theory called like breast screen or something, right? Like, and it's this idea that you have this attachment to like this image of your mother's breast or something, and like you project, yeah, and like you're projecting it onto like different situations, and like you just get into these like crazy like rabbit holes of just where it becomes so self-referential that it's not useful, right? Um, but on the other hand, I do see a lot of overlap between like non-dualism and analysis, or at least some like they're adjacent to each other at different points, right? And so one perfect example, there's this essay that I love called from a psychoanalyst called Beyond, and the I can't remember his first name, and I butcher it, and be really clear that I'm from Eastern North Carolina if I tried to land his first name, but it's called On Memory and Desire, and it's like page and a half or something. I think I've probably shared it with you over the years, but essentially the idea is his argument is that the proper psychoanalytic stance is uh, that you have no memory of your patient and you have no desire for your patient. You just sort of receive it.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is that we carry these constructs or these ideas of people in our head, and we're always interfacing with the idea that we have of that person. And so the proper training for an analyst is to be able to recognize that I'm coming into this with this construct of Tripp, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rarely am I totally present, right? Like I'm interacting with my perception of what Tripp is in any given moment. And that could be, if I'm feeling insecure, if I'm feeling, whatever, and you're coming at me with a certain type of energy, then I'm responding to this, my insecurity melding with this energy, and I'm in my past with you or whatever, versus how do you become totally present with someone? And that means like letting go of memory of that person or desire for that person or desires you have for that person. And so I think like, if you take that as like a rest sort of tool in the psychoanalyst training, right? Like that's their default, that sounds a whole lot like non-dualism, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and even like what you were just saying was very Donald Hoffman-esque in terms of, the graphic user interface. Like we don't interface with the world, we interface with what we perceive as the world, and what we're able to perceive is evolutionary in nature. And yeah, I mean, again, I think like any of these schools of thought, they are, if you're earnest about it, it can get you closer to whatever truth is.
Yeah.
But you may have to, you may have to accept a bunch of crazy claims, just like what I think of with religion. Like there's a lot of, the golden rule is great, turn the other cheek, great. I don't necessarily have to believe in bodies turning into bread to get the goodness out of it, and I can kind of throw out some of the Leviticus stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, one thing that I found, as I'm getting maybe more mature in a worldview and in terms of understanding others is they are all, it's that Zen saying, right? Like, don't mistake the finger for the moon.
Yes.
So like what you're pointing towards isn't it. I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm becoming more tolerant that like we're just going to agree to disagree for whatever reason on things that I found like somewhat foundational and hard to like really, it's hard for me to get over it. But I think I've gotten better in the last couple years. Like I'm trying to be more generous to other people, that we don't have to wholesale agree on everything for me to take lessons that are very valuable from someone.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had some experience like recently that just perfectly captures that, right? I have a friend or jujitsu teammate that in any other context I would never interact with or have anything to do with. Just not a whole lot of overlapping life interests beyond jujitsu, and so she's super into like astrology and crystals, and honestly one of the most gullible human beings I've ever met in my entire life, right? Like you can't really joke with her because you have to, like, she can't not bite something like hook, line, and sinker, and so it's almost like cruel to joke with her, right? Like you're playing, like she can't help herself. And so we were having some conversation recently where she was like offering to read me my spirit animal cards or some stuff like this, and I was like, I can't tell you how much I disagree with, like, you're just like how little value I find in that, and implausible, or something to that effect, right? And she's like, but it's a science. It's been around for 10,000 years or something. And I was like, you know what? We just can move on. We don't have to talk about this. There's no, like we so fundamentally, we don't, we're so far off in terms of like worldview that I have no idea how we would even begin to bridge the gap in this. So let's just enjoy each other's company in the only way that we can, and let's move on.
So maybe a little bit of a hard segue, but
Mm-hmm.
one of the questions I've got rattling around is, as we've talked about therapy, we just touched on coaching, and I guess I'm wondering, what's the value of a human in the loop? And what I mean by that is, um, I'm someone who tends to be very self-motivated when I want to learn something.
Yeah, yeah.
And I definitely value a human in the loop. But one of the things that I mean, I'm increasingly struggling to find maybe the right people to get in the loop, like the right, whether it's advisors, coaches,
Uh-huh.
to help me both personally and professionally. Like, I don't need a trainer to go to the gym. Like and it's not something like I don't need to commit to a trainer. Like if I, weren't doing yoga, other running, etc., like I might need an external motivator to get me to show up to do some sort of physical activity.
Yeah, yeah.
And then same thing I think can be true about learning, new technical skills for work or anything else. And now that we've got AI, which to me is like the best, assistant and teacher trainer in some way. Not going to go so far as to call it a coach and a therapist yet, but our CTO asked me to start learning a little WordPress, and I'm not going to go find a mentor to teach me this. I'm going to use ChatGPT. And I do enjoy like reading books, and even though sometimes it's not like the quickest way to gain certain insight, I believe in kind of a lattice work of knowledge and understanding, and the more you read, the more you can build out this kind of inclusive framework to navigate the world. But one of the things that gets me, and one of the reasons why I guess I would be a challenging patient or client to some people and a fun one to others, is like I'm kind of coming armed with a lot of like the right information, or at least I think I am, right? I'm gonna at least be a learned person that you're gonna have to be on your A game with, or I'm gonna write you off. So sorry, the question goes like, what's it? I'm just wondering, why do we need humans in the loop, or do we? And what do you see the value in that?
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting question, right? So my initial thought to that is like, why do we need humans, right? Well, because we're primates, we're communal creatures, all that sort of stuff, right? And I think that's a really simple answer, but I still think it's true. Um, I'm not terribly dissimilar from you, right? Like if I become interested and I want to pursue something, I just jump in and I'm going to learn. I'm going to fuck up. I'm going to make all my mistakes and fail. I just get incrementally better. But the process of doing that for me is always enhanced by like doing it with another human or having another like some sort of human involved, even if it's just on the like just the feeling level, right? Feels better. And I'll hang some meat on that and make it a very practical example. When you and I, in the last year or so, have gotten into lifting, and we use a similar app, and we end up screenshotting our workouts or our lifts or what we've hit. And when you send me one of those things, right? Like it gets me motivated in some sort of way. It's, to your point, we joked around about it even at the beginning, right? Like, oh man, I gotta catch up a little bit. Like I didn't want to lift this weekend. I was exhausted and really wasn't feeling it. But there is this like general trajectory that I'm trying to kind of keep up with in response to you being in the loop on that. I think that's maybe just a core process for me and probably for most people, right? That isn't just limited to something like that.
Totally. And I mean, I think like the parallel to like having a sponsor or something is there. I mean, that's different because I guess that's what I'm interested in too, is like I think my head gravitates towards like some sort of, I don't want to say power dynamics, but like put it like some sort of hierarchy. Like if I'm coming to you for advice, I like I'm either coming to you, we're peers, or you're coming to me. And I don't know that that's always like necessarily super helpful. Well, I think for people like me, it tends to not allow me to receive the benefit I could from others at a peer, or someone who I don't put as at a higher rung than myself. Like I think there's a lot I have to learn from peers and people, at a lower rung or whatever. That maybe I'm not doing enough.
Interesting. Why do you think that is?
I mean, I think generally because I feel like I've worked really, not just like worked hard, but worked hard, thought hard, put in all the reps. And so when I come to a conclusion on whatever the issue is, like usually I've got a lot of evidence behind it. So I can discount people who maybe haven't put in all the work, even if they are actually just right on that example. Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I would also kick this back to you, like on the, maybe the consulting front, because we've engaged, whether it's marketing agencies, whether it's, individuals to consult on specific problems. And I wouldn't say that we have been the most successful at that overall.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know what the so what is, or if you have any thoughts from it, but I think it goes back to the uniqueness thing. And I think, since we're fairly similar, I'd argue that I think sometimes when we know that, it goes back to the fundamentals piece. Like almost always the advice people are giving us is really fundamental, and we just haven't done the basics long enough to achieve success, but we want some quick shortcut to get there. And when they're not offering the shortcut, when they start by saying you got to be data driven, you got to create a sales funnel, and you got to do X, Y, and Z, it's like, yeah, we already know that, but we need the trick. And it's like, well, then you just monitor and maintain and keep improving along the way. And it's like, that is the only answer.
Yeah. How do you get better by doing it? Yeah.
Yeah. And then you get better at picking apart the system and what you need to get better at. And so I see it, and maybe we'll go to the Ashtanga Jiu-Jitsu kind of analogy, but I very much value having a teacher, when I'm going to wake up at 3:30 on Wednesday so I can go practice with my teacher in Charlotte that morning.
Yeah.
And I'm not looking to an Ashtanga teacher for enlightenment teachings. I'm looking for practical physical adjustments and recommendations that I can't do on my own. And I have, because my spiritual side is kind of full elsewhere. And not that I'm not looking to that, and I would even say, so my teacher in Charlotte, I would venture to say she's more on the woo-woo side and has gotten more into, kind of Hinduism, chanting, just like my dad's real into chanting and X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, these are all tools maybe, but I don't need them for the waking up project or whatever.
Right.
But I do value it. And then I value the hierarchy there, because I do, in my life, I want to go there and I just want to be a student. Yeah. And I want someone else to be in charge for a little bit.
Yeah. There is something, I mean, for me, there's something in coaching or, getting consulted on, any sort of thing where perhaps the benefit is that in this moment, I'm suspending my ego. And I don't, and I mean ego both in the sort of Eastern sense, but also in the psychoanalytic stance, where we can become, egotistical or something, right? In that moment, I think it's subjecting yourself to coaching is a sort of intentional surrender of the ego. And in that moment, I am going to become the student, right? And I think there's just value in that sometimes, right? Even if it's just a contemplative exercise, right? Why do you sit on why do I wake up in the morning, sit down and close my eyes for 10 minutes and meditate or whatever, or have a sitting practice? It's because there's value in the exercise of it. But I've done it long enough now that I can, if I catch myself in my head or I'm suffering needlessly, I am at a place in my own contemplative practice where I can I can pierce through that, right, and come back to presentness in some sort of way. But that doesn't change the fact that there's still some value in me having that practice, right? I don't think I'm going to gain new insights from it. I don't think I'm going to have some sort of you know, uh, ego death sort of experience or any, something nothing profound's ever going to happen, right? I'm not going to notice or see anything else, right? It's all there anyway. But it's the act of doing it, I think, has value in and of itself. So that's what I would say I think the value in coaching is.
Well, I'm gonna put a pin in this, and I think either next episode or in the future, I'm going to start out with the question, do you think you're enlightened? Because I think that would be a really fun one to tease out some ideas around the contemplative side of things. and everyone will think that we've been getting high on our own supply. But maybe as we kind of wrap up, I, as someone who is now took a pause from kind of external parties giving me feedback for the last 2 years, because I think I'd been doing too much of that. And I saw a quote on LinkedIn, I think today, more businesses fail from friends' advice than they do like business problems. And like, if you ask too many people for advice, it just comes into conflict. And then you're spending all your time like trying to figure out who to listen to. But as I go back into a place where I'm like, okay, I need to do some work on myself. I want to smooth out certain facets of my being or life or whatnot. I'm certainly thinking like, what do I need to come to the relationship with? And so I'd be curious what your thoughts are if you were giving, especially like a guy advice who maybe hasn't engaged in therapy.
Yeah.
What's kind of the nuanced perspective of finding the right therapist in terms of like, hey, is this person actually good for me? Let me not just like go in like Crystal's lady and be like, you're the one in charge. Like, I'm deferring to you entirely.
Yeah.
But also, be able to get the most out of the experience, regardless of, differences in semantics, or, hey, I really want to get my, I want to get something in my life together, but this therapist doesn't have that thing in their life together. So why would I listen to them? Maybe even reframe that or rephrase it, because that was not a good framing.
No, so essentially, like, how do you find a good therapist? Or a good therapist match or good coaching match?
Well, and how do you let me refine that. So the match piece, like, that's you vetting them, right? But then how do you do the work to show up to get the most out of it? Like, and again, there may be some mutual vetting type thing, but like, I think it's twofold. One, it's like, I need to use discernment to see, is this person going to be able to help? And if I'm going to continue with them, I need to put some faith into the process. And how do I show up well, even though no one's, going to be a godlike being?
Yeah. I think generally this is interesting. This is like goes right back to what we were talking about earlier. It's doing the fundamentals, right? Like, if I'm going to show up and engage in therapy or something like that, or coaching, then you should probably do what the person's asking you to do, right? And I think about a lot of clients and stuff that I had a guy one time that he would come into my office a couple of times a week, and he would sit down and he's just sort of this depressed Eeyore. He was like, "Cool, man. Have you worked out today?" Like, no. Have you had any water today? No. Have you what time did you go to bed last night? Like 1 o'clock in the morning or something, right? Like, and it's like, well, dude, how are you gonna there's nothing I'm gonna tell you that's gonna make you feel better, right? Like, you're running with an anchor right now. So like, until you do these foundational things, like, what are you gonna get out of it? And so I think that's sort of it, right? Like, you have to kind of show up and do your part. And so I think in terms of, back to the discernment piece and trying to find the right match, it's generally finding someone that's going to be probably at least give you good advice, right? Like, and I know that sounds really basic, but I'm not going to go to someone that's going to tell me to do something that I'm just not going to do, right? Or just violate internal code or ethics or something, or that, like, something that's a hard line for me, right? Like, I'm not going to, if I show up to a therapist and they start telling me, reading my astrological signs, like, it's too big a hurdle to clear. I can't suspend that level of distance to engage in it, right? So I think, and I'm never going to do the work to show up well for someone like that.
So I think that's actually a good way to phrase it. Like, I have the "don't ask for advice if you're not going to take it" kind of moniker.
I love
And
that. Yeah.
so I was asking for too much advice, and I was taking bits and pieces. And so I decided, like, just quit asking for advice. Like, you got to dig yourself out of this hole. And now, as I'm showing back up, I am trying to do the work ahead of time to then be in a place, if I'm going to ask for feedback on it, like, it doesn't mean I'm blindly going to follow, but it means, like, if I keep not listening to a person, then I need to just end the relationship. Like, it's not a power struggle. Like, they're not getting anything out of it for me to show them that I was right and they were wrong. Like, I went to them for their help.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think sometimes like people get pitted in that relationship, probably with therapists. Like, I feel like you hear that with power struggles in therapy. And it's like, at some level, and again, depending on where you are, this may not be true in early stages of recovery where you just need to listen, right? But if you're working on maybe these finer points in kind of human evolution, then, if it's not working, just end the relationship, but don't show up and try and get in a struggle with them. Just say, this isn't what I need anymore.
Yeah. The help rejecting complainer.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
terrible. Yeah, yeah.
I like that. Help rejecting complainer.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard that.
Yeah, yeah. That's I don't know where I heard it at some point in time, but they're the worst sort of people. I mean, they're just the people I dislike being around about as much as even in like therapeutic context.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess that's a wrap. I mean, I gotta say, like, I don't know. I'm curious if one of our 3 followers has enjoyed our last few conversations, because to me, they feel like we're circling the drain on something, or at least there's a thread that I feel like we're following, and I like where it's going.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. Until next time.
Till next time. See you.
We covered a lot of ground, from ramen and workouts to the deeper questions around coaching, therapy, and what it really means to flourish. If nothing else, I hope this conversation sparked something. Maybe a question you've been sitting with, or a reminder that you don't have to figure it out alone. Thanks for listening to Open Source Health. We'll see you next time.